Right. Uh, yeah. Uh,
Cool.
maybe we can I don't know like what's your usual format, but I guess we can
Yeah.
start with some like introduction so we get
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I'll generally chop off the beginning of like
Yeah,
it's recording now, but I won't include this
sure.
bit. Um but yeah. So yeah. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yours? By the way, there isn't really a usual format yet. I'm still figuring out the format. I'm
Yeah.
not exactly an experienced YouTuber. It's just that um, I have a bunch of interesting conversations, and it occurred to me that many of them would be interesting to other people, and it's useful to record them. Um,
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I can start. So I'm
yes,
Bolek. I if I can like introduce myself,
please.
I'm quite like generalist and have a lot of different interests, but one of them is I was in tech, and then basically the company I was working for was acquired, and then during the process and also before I started to look into different fields that I'm interested in that I think would like resonate with my personal mission, I guess, and the personal mission is to unlock potential that's somehow being dampened, I guess.
Hmm.
One of the topics I'm interested in and I'm working in the field is longevity, so kind of
Hmm.
extending the healthy part of our lives. Uh, and then also to that connected a bit is also mental health, which is something that I'm uh, I guess interested because I see it as a more and more important problem that not that many people are, well, I guess are aware of, but the solutions are still kind of very fragmented, and then I don't see as that big of a progress in the field, I guess.
Hmm.
But I guess in segue through this is towards Alexithymia, because from in my opinion or like through my exploration and my own, I guess, work, meditation and that kind of stuff, I think there's a way how to generalize the Alexithymia is kind of like on the spectrum on the extreme end, but a
Hmm.
lot of people are having problems with emotions, even if they are not like identifying or don't have, diagnosed or somehow classified as Alexithymia. It's just like a
Hmm.
spectrum that Alexithymia is one, I guess, extreme end of, but there's a lot of people in the middle as well. So I think that going for some solutions or trying to, somehow alleviate alexithymia would also benefit quite a lot of other people who are not that extreme on the spectrum, but still have a lot of, I guess, issues with emotions. And from the working with emotions, then you can probably start to see like reverberations once you understand yourself better into like other, issues like even like anxiety and those general problems that most of people have.
Hmm.
So kind of a being able to work with your emotions and understand them is, I think, like a really key skill that a lot of people lack. And I also had to learn it myself, basically on my own a bit. So that's
Hmm.
how I'm kind of interested in the field. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. No, very much agree with a lot of what you're saying. I have a similar arc of was in tech to a large degree. Still, I'm in tech, just not as a developer anymore. And at some point, I realized that I was kind of miserable and that I should read a ton of books and figure out what to do about that. And so I've picked up like a relatively large emotional toolkit over the last couple of years, trying to um, for want of a better term, get more in touch with my emotions. But I don't think that's actually how it works. But it um, increase emotional awareness, deal with some long-standing anxiety issues and other emotional issues, and at this point, doing pretty well. It's a long way to go, I think, because I started after I started in my sort of mid 30s and had done plenty of damage by that point. So I'm sort of having to unwind a lot of it, but I'm certainly way less anxious and a fair bit happier than I was when I
That's
started the whole
great. Yeah.
process. And um, I don't know that I would have ever have like formally said I had alexithymia, or alexithymia, but certainly I had what I was calling at the time a very flat emotional profile, which mostly I think is slash was a way of saying depression without saying depression. But
Mhm.
it's and either I'm still somewhat depressed or there's a pandemic on. Hard to tell which is which. um, but yeah, and these days, one of the things I do is I do a bunch of writing where I explain emotions to nerds, basically. And I
Hmm.
think you've seen the most recent iteration of that, in which uh, I essentially try to explain focusing in a way that I think actually allows people who struggle with this sort of thing, either because they're alexithymic or are somewhere on that spectrum, such as being male. It's um, uh, and so yeah, so I've yet to see how well that actually works for people, but people seem to be appreciating that particular article. Um,
Oh
and
yeah, I've read through it, and I think resonated with quite a few bits there. Uh,
Mhm,
and basically, it also kind of touches on the, or you are explaining, I guess, quite well some of the processes that you kind of employed or tried or
mhm,
worked through to actually
mhm,
get closer to or like better understand your own emotions, which is something
mhm,
that I'm interested in how we could, I guess, not platformize, but how we could like
mhm,
take this process and actually like put it and have people actually like access it in an early and easier way, I guess.
mhm,
Because from what I've seen, and even when I like tried, to searching for different solutions for Alexithymia, or there's few good videos. I don't know if you, for example, know the Healthy Gamer GG or like Dr. K.
I'm
The,
aware
yeah.
of. I never get around to watching his videos because I tend to not consume very serious content via video. But
Hmm.
ironically, given that I'm recording these, of course. But
Yeah. No,
it's
no, yeah. So I think he has quite a few good introductory videos to that, and
mhm,
also sees like in the broader picture of Alexithymia being kind of at the bottom, or at least covering a lot of things that are hard to access once
mhm,
you try to get somewhere, and therefore you need to kind of work on that in order to get somewhere deeper as well. So
mhm,
that kind of messaging, or that kind of framing, I guess, is pretty good in his not talks, but I guess sessions or
mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that was one thing. And then I was just like trying to search for if there are some good applications, or like some tools that people are using other
Mhm,
than just some I guess procedural techniques. That I found a few, uh, for example, but they are more general. It's not usually something like targeted or
mhm,
more like selected towards Alexithymia. It's usually just like classical emotion work, some kind of processing
mhm,
meditations, and those kind of things, which is
mhm.
good. But
Yeah.
I still think that there's like a lack of something that's actually trying to target it as it is in more broader set. Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of the my guess, or rather, I don't know for sure why this would be, but like part of why alexithymia is not that targeted is that people seem to really be keen on the idea that it's an intrinsic trait of people, that it's something that you have that is an immutable part of you, and doesn't change, which hasn't been my experience at all. But I
Yeah,
think,
I disagree with that as well. I don't think
yeah,
it's more of a skill, as you mentioned, that you can
yeah,
learn. I guess you have like different predispositions, or like
mm,
you can be talented at the skill naturally,
mm,
or you need to
yeah,
like work extra hard to get it. But I
mm,
still don't think it's something that like you either have or have not. It's
mm,
probably more complex than that, or like not that black and white.
mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I I genuinely don't know if there is even an intrinsic thing to that means people may or may not have struggle with this skill or are excel at the skill. I think a lot more of it is likely to be sort of cultural background and
Hmm.
how you were raised. And and to be honest, like I think of a lot of it is just well trauma basically,
And
where like
environment, yeah.
yeah
Uh,
environment and anything where you haven't been given a good learning environment and have been sort of actively punished to some degree for your emotions, I think
yeah.
tends to result in some degree of not expressing your emotions. And my casual joke about being male is like a form of alexithymia is like
Hmm.
obviously it's very culturally specific. It's not
Yeah.
true everywhere, but there's very much a thing of male gender roles training people to
Yeah,
not express their emotions. And female gender roles also doing so just for like a more specific set of emotions. Like it's much easier to express anger if you're male. Um,
right.
so
Yeah,
um, so
that's
there's
usually
all
the one emotion that men can recognize at least. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, like the two valid male emotions, angry and horny.
No, yeah, I agree with the cultural take,
Yeah.
and also I think I think it was a study somewhere that was trying like into subpopulations or like different groups of people that are actually more prone or have
Hmm.
more kind of representation of alexithymia, and I think it was uh, I know that was one study of like a conglomerate of different facts, but like for example gamers, and then also kind of Asian and Indian populations were
Hmm.
kind of more, at least in the early days, much more on like the uh, performance in school and being more harsh, I guess, than not
Yeah.
that emotionally flexible. It's
Hmm.
probably like generalization, but I guess there are definitely some cultural and environmental not things, but like factors that you can pretty much see then on a large
Hmm.
scale basis play out over time. So I think there's definitely like a there are groups of people that are more prone to this,
Hmm.
and it's even then kind of better, not better, but it's I think those are the good groups that some interventions would be great to like try with or like trial with,
Hmm.
because it would make sense actually to try to do something about it. So that's one of the things that I'm like trying to do right now,
Hmm.
figure out how to do that actually, how to like develop.
Hmm.
uh, it's not the development of the app. I guess it's not that big of a problem. It's more about the process, right? Like how should the
Hmm.
process work, and what would actually be helpful, and what kind of like
Hmm.
steps are there in the process that the app can like
Hmm.
uh, be valuable and helpful with. Which I
Yeah.
guess is a bit question is a question that I'd like to ask you. Like I think you mentioned some things already in the article,
Hmm.
but overall, like if you would have to summarize how you think the process, or like what are the biggest components of some kind of improvement in this regard, like what would it be?
Yeah, I think the things that there are like a couple of foundational skills which I was trying to point to in the article, which I think are basically something like bodily awareness and mindfulness. Um,
Yeah,
I don't think like a full blown mindfulness practice is either necessary or particularly helpful for dealing with alexithymia, but like there are certain sort of metacognitive skills of like
yeah,
paying attention to your thought process and paying attention to your intuitive like directing your attention that I think is useful to do, and you can probably pick up enough of it to get to the rest of the process within like a week or two of 5 minutes mindfulness a day. I don't think,
yeah,
which obviously you can't get like great at mindfulness with that amount, but I don't think the basic attention skill that you need for emotions is particularly hard. Um, and like similarly, body scanning, paying attention to like, okay, this is what I'm feeling here, and something that um, essentially just like got people to do that possibly at random points in the day
hmm,
would be pretty useful for this. Um, it's for me the process has largely been in one of reading lots of therapy books and trying on new experiential states through them and like trying to figure out um, not really new experiential states, labels for things that I was already experiencing but not consciously
hmm,
noticing. Um, which, as I say, therapy books. Some of them are philosophy books as well. Like Experiences of Depression was one of is a book
hmm.
by the philosopher Matthew Ratcliffe, and I found it super useful for giving me terms for a bunch of experiences that I wasn't previously able to label.
I see.
So um, so yeah, I think the specifically for the problem of alexithymia, I think most of what I needed was um, paying like being pointed out the things I could already do, which I already had access to from a degree of like I was already pretty good at using my brain for thinking about things, right? Which means necessarily that I had a reasonably good intuitive sense of a lot of
Hmm.
subjects. And so, because essentially what expertise is building up intuitions. Um, and so I could draw on that as like a starting model for this is what an intuition feels like. Here's how to pay attention to it, and then trying to generalize from there. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm babbling a little bit. I don't think I am I
Oh yeah,
answering your question?
I think so. I think I personally did a lot of those things because I think I sent you over the schema that I was trying to put together recently, and
You did.
it
I'm
basic
sorry.
yeah, I basically like I figured pretty much the same things, at least in regards to alexithymia, like the I guess most important part, and even from studies that I've like read on it, that the interception part first, that you need to kind of be aware, you know, what you're actually feeling in the body, and then you kind of need the labels for what you're actually feeling. So there also needs to be some like a education component that where you actually uh, learn about the things that you there's this space of things that you can feel, and how those feelings actually are manifesting in the body, right? Or
Mhm.
like what's the triggers in the body, and or like
Yeah.
there's always this discussion between emotions and feelings, and how what good it is to actually like separate them or combine them, or like
Hmm.
it's quite a messy, I guess, at least from
Hmm.
what I've seen. But that process, and then you probably also need some kind of like metacognitive, as you mentioned, or like some meta awareness skill of that's very well learned, or yeah, learned through mindfulness or different kinds of meditations that are
Hmm.
kind of focus, being able to show you the workings of the mind, and
Hmm.
actually track the process of like how the sensation in the body actually over time like results in the feeling,
Hmm.
and what are the, you know, steps there,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that kind of process. So definitely,
Yeah.
and to me maybe it even, I guess there's another step then that's more like even deeper, and it's not necessarily related to alexithymia like directly. It's more of, if you really want to solve some like core issues you have, like mental
Mhm.
problems, some of them are obviously like not that easy to solve, but a lot of them are, even like through your own work, and you can do something with
Mhm.
them. Then you need to, once you have this access to emotions, then you
Mhm.
can much easier start to get to the bottom of those problems, like what are the
Mhm.
root causes, you know, like what are the traumas or like triggers that are actually, and then you can start tracking them, because like without the tools to
Mhm.
actually identify an emotion, you cannot really get to the bottom, because you never know like what are actually, you know, the roots, and where to actually like over time, I guess, focus. So that's
Yeah.
one of the like other things that I think, and that's why I think like alexithymia is key for some like longer term
Mhm.
work with yourself, or like even not alexithymia but the overall some emotion, I guess, work, is because one, if you don't have the skill, it's hard to actually
Mhm.
do anything with like your bigger problems, bigger like more complex mental problems, because you cannot, you don't have the, you don't have the way how to bottom up build the model of like how the problem is actually like working, and where, what are the like, you know, manifestations of the specific problem, or like where
Mhm.
are the trigger points, because you don't have the intuitive sense of like, okay, this feels right, and
Mhm.
therefore, or this doesn't feel right, and where does it come from, and there, then like trace it down there, I guess. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. All of the stuff that I included in the article about feelings, like there was a reason I labeled it a 101 thing. It's essentially it's teaching you the first skill you need, not the last. I think your schema had a whole bunch of things in it that I was also sorry, just looking at the schema now. Um, maybe I'm not thinking of this, but oh yeah, no, there. Yeah, so all of the parts work stuff, for example, um, or and or shadow work. I find that's very useful, and I part of the reason why I recommend the book I recommended, The Power of Focusing, is because I think it teaches focusing in a way that more naturally leads into a parts work model than
Hmm.
a lot of the way current focusing normally does. Like I think it's about 30% of a first course in internal family systems, in that
Hmm.
it does essentially teach you to separate yourself slightly from the sensation and look at it and so on and so forth. Um, I think there's an interesting thing that you might not be considering if you're looking at alexithymia solely as a first step on the route to various more therapeutic things, which
Mm.
may be fine, but it's uh, there's you can think of it as there being like two emotion skills. There's essentially like the emotion skill of sitting there and going, what am I feeling? Yes, I'm like feeling sad. Yes, I feel sadness in my chest, and essentially like very deliberately introspecting on them. And then there's the skill of just sort of like in the moment going, oh, I'm sad. It's or like not even doing that, but just like spontaneously crying, for example. Um, and so alexithymia is, I think, characterized as an inability to say what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Label,
just
yeah.
yeah, to label what you're feeling. But I think there's just as like fixing alexithymia by teaching focusing technically satisfies that condition. But what you will often end up with, and I say this as someone who's absolutely like in this trap at the moment to some degree and knows other people are, is you'll end up with people who can like very seriously sit there and talk about their feelings, but aren't necessarily particularly good at like acting on their feelings
Expressing.
or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
expressing them. Like I think um, if I'm sad, I will probably still just sit here looking neutral, and then if you ask me, I'll be like, yes, of course I'm sad. Can't you tell?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Right.
um, but and so I think, and maybe the solution to this is to just like go deep and fix all your trauma. I don't know, but it's it does feel like there is a you can fix alexithymia without like getting to the point where you behave like someone who doesn't have alexithymia.
Mm.
You've just sort of like fixed the specific diagnostic criteria of it.
I see.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point actually. When I think about it in that way, I guess there's like a counter point or possible like counter argument, like whether it's like, of course it's important and to express the emotion. That I guess the incongruency that I might see there is that whether it needs to be like expressed externally or
mhm,
whether it's enough to be to that if you are like able to process it internally, because that might also be like different. I know it's a different process, but like there is a way how you can process emotion like inside without I guess expressing it like really expressively.
mhm.
uh, but it's a good point that you just like labeling it, I guess it's just like a first step, and you should always,
Mhm.
there should be the step of also being able
Mhm.
to feel through it and process it and somehow like I guess integrate it as well. uh,
Mhm.
Not just like label it, okay, this is the emotion, but not actually doing anything about it or like
Yeah,
working with it more.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's more than just not doing anything about it because like if I'm if I'm sitting here just looking very calm and I say to someone, I'm actually very sad right now and I would like a hug. That is me doing something about it,
Mm,
but it's sort of it's acting cognitively on it. It's like it's basically
right.
it is allowing the emotional reaction to sort of feed my rational planning brain and sort of
Mm,
turning and going from there into a sort of like okay, I will logic my way out of this problem.
mm,
But um, a lot of the time, what you really need to do when you're feeling sad is just have a good cry about it. And that will often, I think, complete the emotion in a way that um, just sort of acknowledging it and um, using it to inform your planning doesn't necessarily.
right. No, yeah, I kind of agree because in the concept that I'm right now like working on, I think the steps that I see there, like necessary steps, or and I can even like show you a quick prototype there later. But basically, one of the things is having a map of emotions that you can like go to and see them and kind of like explore based on pretty easy axis of like how much energy and how much pleasant or unpleasant it is actually. So the basically like simplified Valence effect model, and then you can somehow like map the different emotions on that scale, and then if you kind of like explore them, you would get some education on like how the emotion actually feels in the body usually, or like what are manifestations physical,
Yeah.
how it can look like on the face when somebody's expressing it, because that's another thing that I, at least from some research I read, that it's one of the other problems that the visual facial recognition / processing is inhibited, I guess, in people who have like the severe alexithymia. So even that might be helpful. And then also some descriptions, for example, of like the uh, examples of actions or something like that that usually trigger these emotions. Like what are the situations in which this is the appropriate emotion, so we can like map it more onto your at least approximately on your situation, something like that.
I'm sorry. The reason I started laughing just there was I was just looking at our incredibly serious faces talking about a neutral face talking about this. It's so one thing I don't know if you've looked into God, I'm blanking on her name, but the book How Emotions Are Made. Um,
I think I have it in my reading list, and I
yeah,
probably need to do something like that to actually get
yeah,
the better package of actually each emotion. Yeah.
yeah. So this is Lisa Feldman Barrett. That's her name, and she's got a bunch of interesting claims in it. I think some of them are wrong. Um, it's or I think that some of them are right if you accept the very non-standard definition of emotion that she is using.
Mm,
And in particular, her definition of emotion, I disagree with it entirely because it denies that, for example, dogs have emotions.
mm,
But one of the interesting pieces in there, which I think she's probably right on, is that there isn't a tidy universal mapping of emotions to facial expressions. Um, and I think the reason why I would, or this isn't her claim, this is me speculating wildly without proof, just caveat to follow on. Like the reason why I would expect there to be a problem with um, facial like a link between alexithymia and prosopagnosia, difficulty with facial expressions,
mhm,
either way, is because of much more generalized communication problems. It's essentially when you're talking to someone about your emotions, like it's much easier to do this if they are responding in a way that you recognize and in a way that sort of shows shared emotion. So I think it is, if you it might almost make more sense to think of facial recognition problems as leading to alexithymia for largely the same reason that growing up without being able to speak the language of the people
mm.
around you, you would.
But you
It's
don't have the modeling, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
exactly.
think, yeah, I think that makes sense, and partly that's also why I thought about like including it, because it kind of, if there's like an education section on emotion, again, you can start, I guess, building some kind of at least intuitive link between, oh, this is usually how it might look, or like what are the
Yeah.
I don't think it would be like it could be perfect, because even people can probably have different ways how to express emotions that are valid, I guess. But still, at least some approximation might be helpful. But I it's probably
Yeah.
up to more like precise
Mhm.
discussion. But yeah, maybe I can just quickly show you the prototype I just threw together, and
Yeah, please.
it's
I I
oh
can
yeah,
let you
I
share
probably
your
need
screen
to,
if you.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Give me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to share now.
Yeah, I think it's the screen. Yeah. So I don't know if you are familiar with some of the apps, but okay, I can maybe start even before that with the one of the things that I thought would be helpful for people with like alexithymia or generally with like a more emotional problem with emotional tracking or something like that is some kind of like mood tracker. But then I realized that most of the mood trackers are actually acting on the moods, which are more of like aggregate, already, you know, generalized emotions that are really broad. And usually mood trackers have like, you know, sad, angry, maybe 5 or 6 like different emotions, which are not necessarily helpful, I guess, when you are really trying to like address alexithymia, because in a sense it even makes the problem but like worse, because it gives you just like a few general buckets and don't really you never go like more deeper into the specifics of specific emotions. So something like this, there was this app called Mood Meter. If I don't know if you saw, but it's kind of a it has a similar model where it maps the different emotions on like a scale, and then if you would like kind of like explore, you would get some variations of the emotions in this way. So then you could kind of, you know, start building the vocabulary, I guess. And once you get to one of them, you'll get some, I'm not yet sure like what all should be there, but some kind of different information of how that one emotion can, you know, feel in the body. There's pretty good research on some ways like where most of the emotions are like felt usually, or like what sensations, you know, whether it's you know, heat or whether heartbeat or basically other bodily functions that you can somehow describe. Maybe some of the facial emotions, maybe even like emojis, but that might be too simplistic. And then some of the things that I mentioned, like, you know, what are the usual ways it's displayed, what are the sensations, and some like situations and something like that. So that would be like the one of the things. And then the other part would be trying to describe like what is your situations where it was triggered, and what are basically more description about that, plus some way to tag it as well if you want to create some like system of how to later look at it or like analyze the emotions. And I think the last step is something like if you have the time at the moment, or if you want to dive deeper, there should probably be some like quick, as you mentioned it, some like process of feeling through it. I got recommended this pretty good, like, well, at least from, I haven't tried it that much, but the the concept seems pretty good. The soft and soothe allow emotion. That's more of like for negative meditation, which is more, I guess, for like negative emotions, but still the process of like finding the emotion, feeling through it, and some like how like trying to lighten the space where you in your body when you're feeling it, and allowing the emotion for the emotion to exist, and actually accepting it as one of your emotions. That kind of I think that's or that kind of some kind of process like that to actually inspire or like teach this way how to like feel through an emotion when you're feeling it, rather than just, you know, labeling it and then just like again putting it aside and not doing anything with it. So this is kind of like the basic flow that I would be thinking of, and so yeah.
Yeah, this looks pretty interesting. If you could send me a link to some of the research about emotions being felt in particular body parts, I would be super interested in that, by the way,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I I genuinely wasn't sure until you said that whether there was a common mapping of body parts, bodily sensations to emotions, or whether it was something that everyone had to figure it out for
I
themselves.
saw, yeah, I guess I I think it was, yeah, I'll send the link over. I think there is some, uh, and it's more based on like a, I'm not sure what was the specific like screening method that they were using, but it was somehow it looked interesting because there's a lot of emotions in different basically parts of body. Maybe I can even quickly find it. What was it? Emotion, wrapped in the body. Yeah, I think it's this one. I don't know if you've ever seen this image.
Hmm.
This basically like a way. I think it was. I'm not yet completely sure about the right now about the research how they made it, but it's basically average of people reporting where in the body they feel the emotion. So that kind of thing that I think might make sense, or at least inform some more you know, detailed explanation of the emotions, at least in the app, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that looks super interesting. Thank you. Um, Circling back, one of the interesting things about the soothe something allow a model is, a thing I often notice is that a lot of things that try to help people get better at emotions basically do seem to assume that all emotions are negative.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
my problem with it as well a bit. Yeah.
yeah, it's uh, definitely like one of the this turned out mostly to be false in the end. One of the things I was saying at the beginning of this whole process for me though was that the problem wasn't that I was full of negative emotions; it was that I had a lack of positive emotions. It turns out
Mhm.
I also had plenty of negative emotions, and I was just ignoring them. It's but the motivation was definitely something more along the lines of like happiness seems good. How do I try that? Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
um, and that also I think is like part of why the sort of the slow versus spontaneous fixes to alexithymia is an interesting split, because I think for negative emotions, like I was using the example of sadness, but to some degree, it is basically okay to say, yes, I'm feeling very sad. I would like a hug, please, in a completely emotionless manner, like this, because like this does in some sense solve your problem. Like it allows you to engage with the emotion in a practical way that does the action it's pointing towards. It's not necessarily the most efficient or effective way of doing that, but like it does work. But I think it's it's genuinely impairing to basically be having an amazing time with someone else and go, yes, I'm very happy. Can you not tell that I'm very happy? I'm positively ecstatic right now.
Right. So like
And
not
yeah,
being able to actually express it in the
yeah, exactly. Because part of what a lot of positive emotions have a social function, right?
yeah.
It's if you're enjoying a party, then the fact that everyone is expressing their happiness is part of that. And so the the lack of mapping from emotion to action and expression, I think, is part of the impairment. It's part of what is causing you an actual problem. And it doesn't really matter if you can. I mean, that's not true. It absolutely matters if you can tell people that you're happy, um, and and like it is still in those situations. It is strictly better to be able to say, yes, I'm happy. I'm just not very good at expressing that. But it's
Right. It's not the same
yeah,
level of
yeah,
communication that's intuitive and more like
yeah, mhm,
less. There's not the bottleneck of actually needing to say that
yeah.
and explain it, other than just like expressing it, and everybody
Yeah.
is much earlier on the same page.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and also like even if you do express it, I think it is like it is a far more limited version of it. I
yeah,
think
right.
if everyone is standing around talking rationally about how ecstatic they are to be here, it is a lesser experience
Yeah.
than everyone properly participating in the shared joy. Um,
Okay, that's actually a good point, and I I'm still not sure how like that could be like what's the like how to prompt that, I guess. I thought the soft and sooth allow or
mhm,
whatever it's called meditation is could be relatively good for like negative emotions, since
mhm,
that's how, even though I still have a bit of problem with the approach of like, always teaching people to cope, since coping
mhm,
is not really doing is
mhm,
not going to the root over
mhm,
time. It's more like accommodating it and I guess accepting it as it's something that's
mhm,
going to be there and not really
mhm.
doing anything that much
Yeah,
about it, I guess. But those are different. There are
mhm,
definitely levels where
yeah.
you still sometimes you just need to start with coping, and then over time you probably
Mhm,
can find the energy to actually work on it more,
mhm,
or have more I guess bandwidth or something like that.
mhm.
But still, that's a good point that some way how to like prompt the expression, or like the yeah, I'm wondering like what's the core issue there, like if you can actually label the emotion somehow, but you are not able to express it, um is, I guess it feels like it's still some kind of a problem with you being to able to like be present in your body, or like, you know, connected to your actually have, because if you are feeling an emotion, I guess, particularly strong, it prompts you to some like you know, body language and professions naturally, I guess, or intuitively. So if when that is, when that feedback, or like where that loop doesn't work, there needs to be somewhere there's something stuck there, right? And I
Yeah.
guess it's either like the control, or I guess not confidence, but some kind of like a feel in your body that you can like manifest that emotion yourself, and that it's not like that you're, it doesn't feel like you're uh, restricted to do that, or that your mind restricts you, something like that.
Yeah.
I can't like find the words right now, but it's probably
Yeah.
somewhere there, I guess.
Yeah. It definitely feels like one of the things that could be happening is not feeling safe to express the emotion, I guess.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think that maybe that wasn't what you were pointing to, but like certainly like a lack of confidence in expressing the emotion feels like a safety issue to me.
In a sense, yeah, because
Yeah.
right, if you, yeah, because if you had the safe, if you had the space was safe for you, then you don't need that much of confidence to actually break
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
Yeah. The um the other possible answer, which comes more from like the Alexander technique side of things, is the thing that is stopping you from expressing your emotions is that you're too in your head, um,
Yeah.
and and so the thing to be doing is essentially to stop self-monitoring and start essentially focusing more on the other people. Um, so it's entirely possible that um, the thing to do here is something along the lines of, um, okay, you've done the focusing loop. You've gone, oh, I'm happy. Um, Great. Now stop paying attention to your emotions and start paying attention to the other people in the room, and everything will go more smoothly then. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if that I don't know if that will actually work. And
Hmm.
um,
Oh, that's interesting, because yeah, if you are too focused on yourself, then you obviously start like projecting and also thinking about like what if the other people notice it as well, and that kind of stuff.
mhm,
So once you get like more present, I guess, present with other people too,
mhm,
then it might help.
mhm.
No, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I guess there are some environmental factors, right? Like if you're feeling safe, and what are the people around you, but and that, and then probably some form of like being able to connect to your own like body, so some like body work, or like being able to feel okay in your body, in that sense that you can profess the emotions that are in there, and I guess something like that. Hmm. I'll need to think about that more, but it's definitely a good point that there needs to be some closing of the loop, not just the labeling, but then also the professing to actually go further with that. Yeah.
This is tangential slash looping back, but I wonder with the I've already forgotten all of them. The soothe, allow, whatever the third one and was. I wonder if the thing you want for their for positive emotions is something more like gratitude journaling, um,
Mhm.
essentially, because expressing gratitude for positive emotions seems to be the thing that is known to work reasonably well. Um, and gratitude journaling works really badly if you try and force it on when you're not experiencing positive emotions, but
Hmm.
it does seem to work when there actually are things that you experience gratitude for. And um, I wonder if something like I'm grateful for this emotion slash I want to make plans to do more of this or something. Um,
Mhm.
um,
maybe it's not even about the journaling that much, but it's more about the taking yourself into that frame of thinking of like gratitude. So maybe it's not like maybe journaling is the right way, or maybe uh, some opposite, not opposite, but some if the soothe allow or whatever meditation is like for negative ones, then for the positive ones, there's probably some way how to nudge the person to be in the moment and be grateful for that emotion
Yeah.
and feel through that in that prism, I guess, and
Yeah.
plan for more or something like that. Teach the feedback loop of like being
Yeah.
grateful for that, which also again uh, enhances the positive
Yeah.
experience of that.
Yeah. Instead of soothe and allow, you've got celebrate and embrace almost.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Celebration, yeah. And so, are you do you have a? I'm kind of still in the process of figuring out what would make the most sense, or whether this would actually be helpful. Like, do you think it might be helpful, or in if you were going through the process yourself, did you sometimes like think about that you would like to have some tool for being that you didn't have or something like that?
I think the thing that I feel has been most lacking from my process, and I think that a lot of people I know have definitely felt was lacking as well, is something like prompts to introspect, which is where I think you're sort of going with some of the mood check-ins,
Yeah.
and the reason for that was that I've spent a great deal of time having a really good toolkit of introspection exercises and things I can do to engage with feelings and so forth, and using them way, way less often than I ever should. Um,
So you like
because
were building the building, but you never actually entered it on the regular time during your regular life, and you would like
yeah,
to, yeah.
yeah, and it's not that I didn't do these things. It's that I would do them. Like there were things that I could do quite often and would have benefited from doing quite often that I was really doing only in a crisis or only every week or two or things like that. So I think anything that got me to do slightly more and slightly more regular exercises that helped me engage with this sort of work, I think would have been helpful. I must admit, I'm not sure a mood check-in would have been it. Um, I think
It's probably connected to the mindfulness exercise or something like
yeah,
that yeah.
yeah. Like I think the mood check-in. I just sorry, I don't mean to suggest the mood check-in stuff is a bad idea. I just mean more. I don't know if that was the bottleneck on where I needed to spend more time. Um, it's more the sort of things that I wasn't doing were things like journaling or
Yeah.
uh, or noticing, oh, that's an interesting reaction. I wonder if I should sort of explore what's going on in that reaction. No, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go do something else.
No, that's kind of like what I wanted to do with the mood
Mhm,
check-in, because the mood check-in is like the basis, but the major part, I guess, should be the actual description of like how did that emotion come up and what do you want to do with it next, or like what are your
mhm,
feelings around it, or like what are your the language always is problematic in this, but like what the surrounding context, I guess, around
mhm,
that emotion. And since if there was a if that was somehow like built as a habit, and the app could help with that, then I
mhm,
think it can, and with some like maybe bridge into either like mindfulness or the soothe allow or
mhm,
even like celebration of some emotions, then
mhm,
that could probably build some sort of like habit where you label emotion, actually like explore it a bit, like the context
mhm,
around it, then log it somewhere where you can maybe sometime
mhm.
later have some analytics on top of it, like whether
Yeah.
certain words are repeated with certain emotions, and
Mhm,
whether that's something that you want to look more into maybe, and then some like meditation or like introspection training
mhm.
as well. So
Yeah.
I guess like that's the whole package that I would like to have as well.
Mhm.
and I'm still figuring out like whether this flow or this process makes sense. It's probably I probably
Yeah,
needs to be tried in the field, but yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, certainly the basic idea sounds pretty sensible to me. It's, I think the biggest obstacle that occurs to me is that depending on when you interrupt people, like most of the
Mm,
time, people will either not be experiencing any particularly strong emotion, or will be in the
yeah,
middle of something that they can't stop and immediately introspect during. Um, so I think it needs some sort of workflow for dealing with the fact that um, you'll almost undersample like the most important times. Um, like if I'm
yeah,
currently being
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
if
I
I'm
think
currently
that
being
the
sorry, go on.
yeah, cool. Go on. No, no, go on.
Oh, just to continue with the example, like if I'm currently being chased by a tiger and the app pings, I'm not going to sort of like get the
Yeah,
app out and go negative, high energy.
yeah.
um,
No, yeah. I that's one of my um reservations with this approach as well, because obviously the best thing or like the most convenient or the best way how you would like to have this is to be like sort of almost automatic, that you would get prompt when you feel something, when and
mhm,
that would need to be somehow detected, so you're it's
yeah.
like a that doesn't work basically.
Hmm.
So I guess the way how that might be over yeah is because is through building some sort of habit, and
Yeah.
once you are in the habit of like that once you feel some emotion you label it, maybe by some random prompts that
Hmm.
maybe you label some like not the highest emotions that you been through, but maybe like you can see whether there were some emotions in the last few hours, something like that. And
Hmm.
then once you build this kind of habit, then it's like more likely that once the tiger actually stops chasing you,
Hmm.
and then you are like winding down from the emotion, then you
Yeah.
would be maybe like this is pretty intense emotion that might be
Hmm.
worth like logging and doing
Hmm.
something more about it, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's a probably process how to
Hmm.
get it to work better that way.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And yeah, certainly I think to the degree that you can separate the point at which it pings you from the point at which you have to do a detailed analysis of that.
Mm,
Um, I mean, it sort of helps, but it is harder to recreate in the aftermath.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a good advice other than like try it out on a bunch of users.
yeah,
Um, uh, I wonder if you've thought about looking into any of the health tracking devices because you said something like ideally it would ping you to introspect whenever you're having a strong emotion. Like I wonder if you can detect that off something like an Aura Ring or a Fitbit or whatever. My guess is probably not, except for the really like intense emotions, which are exactly the ones you won't sample. But
yeah, yeah. We are kind of even previously with the uh, one friend, we are kind of exploring that, the way how we could use some trackers or wearables to actually get this kind of signal. But I don't think the science is there yet. It's more of
yeah,
the data is noisy, and even that like you usually want the data you usually want the wearables data you usually use to look at like more longer term
hmm,
trends.
yeah,
And if you would try to identify like blimps in the data, then more or less it's usually error, or like
yeah,
it's something not that, and the emotions are usually not that big of a like a physiological signal that you would be able
hmm,
to pick up with some of those like trackers. Some of them maybe, yeah, but
yeah,
it's and even the mapping is not there like scientifically, like what
hmm,
exactly how exactly like physiologically does this one
hmm,
emotion actually like look like. So I guess
yeah,
there could be probably like some things for I don't know, if again like detecting anger or something like that. If you're like really
hmm,
quickly or start
hmm,
your heart beats up starts beating faster, something like that,
hmm,
maybe. But I don't think it's a viable way how to actually get somewhere like in the short term. In the long term,
yeah,
probably yeah. Once you have like better models for like multimodal
hmm,
assessment of emotion from even like different from facial data, for example, there
hmm,
are some good researchers on that. Not just like from facial expressions, but actually from for example, your head moves a bit each time your heart beats, so then you can detect like a heart rate and heart rate variability from that, even though probably not that precisely. And respiration rate, which is kind of also can imply a lot of things. Even like pupil size dilation is something that there are some researchers that are, but it's still a nascent field. So that I think that would take another like 5 years until there's something that can track you reasonably well and then assume reasonably well from those signals what kind of emotion you might feel. So I don't think we're there yet, but I would like to have that as well. But it's yeah.
So not doing this is completely reasonable, but like to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that you would use the tracker to figure out the emotion. I was suggesting that you would use the tracker to indicate
for like differential.
For essentially going, oh, now might be a good time to ping. So like I definitely don't think that like if you can look at the data feed coming off an Aura ring or whatever and go, oh yes, this person is currently angry, but if you notice like a spike in heart rate, a skin temperature, or whatever, like that's probably an indication that some sort of emotion is happening. But you're absolutely right. This is too clever and probably not worth doing.
But you're actually right that might be more possible in relatively short term to actually get at least detect some like significant changes in some markers that are already tracked pretty well, and then at least use those as like, because you're right that if something changes quite quickly, you either just had a sprint because you needed to catch a tram or something, but or you actually were in some event that had to do something with your emotions probably as well. So that makes sense to actually try to connect the moment where you're actually paying for some recollection of the emotion that you might have felt based on some markers like that. Yeah, that's actually a good point.
But it's the sort of thing that you want to like try over the course of a couple of days spike, and then when it inevitably doesn't work, go, okay, that was a cool prototype, and just go back to your previous system. Because I think like the random pings are, I think, perfectly fine. I actually used to use a thing called tag time that randomly sampled me during the day, and it was a pretty interesting tool, but I never tried using it for emotion tracking.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's I guess kind of thinking about this as well, but I don't see it right now like a different way. Other than that, if you really want to schedule some, you can either try to sample during the day or have like a specific time during the day where you would try to go through events and recollect them as they happened, like and have some sort of like a reminiscence meditation that you would try to like invoke the emotions again, which is, I guess, possible, but then again takes more time, and even the for people who are not yet able to label and feel the emotions that well, I don't know if that kind of exercise is actually effective at the start. So maybe, yeah.
I wonder if as an initial starting point, like for anyone who is struggling with the labeling with emotions, instead just having a random ping of like report literally on your body and not on any emotional state. Because one of the things I was trying to get people to do in that article is pay attention to physical sensations without worrying about what they mean. Because I think like one of the big problems that I think a lot of people with alexithymia have is that semi-ironically, like when you tell them to pay attention to their feelings, they get really emotional about it and they get really angry and frustrated because you're essentially,
that's the problem, right?
Yeah. And they won't necessarily, and often like they'll identify that that's what's happening, but a lot of the time they won't. And so I think doing things that people can
so training the interception from the other sides, like that would be the first step into, rather than like searching for the word, actually finding the place in the body. That was my second idea, that maybe like there are I see two possible ways. Either have a this list of emotions where you kind of like find things, and based on your associative like things that you maybe read already, or like how these emotions fit together, this might feels like
Yeah.
appropriately, and therefore I will learn more and see like whether it also is congruent with what I feel in the body, or go the other way and first like just like have a figure of a body, and then see, okay, I'm feeling something here, and then like what is this feel? Is it like tension, or is it like heat, or is it like whatever? And then based on that you would get some sort of like more personalized list of things that might be actually more relevant as the emotion or something like that. That's I guess the second flow into some yeah.
Yeah, I think that giving people a list of emotion words, I'm not sure is that helpful unless they already know how to, do the. So I guess there's sort of, you can almost imagine there are two types of problem here. Like there's an inability to generate the right emotion word, and there's an inability to detect, judge whether an emotion word is correct. It's, you could think of it almost like writing and reading. That's not quite right as an analogy, but and so one reasonable hypothesis is that people with alexithymia can recognize but not generate the emotion word. And I'm not convinced that this is true. But if it's true, then lists of emotions type approaches will work. If it's not true, then what will happen is you will show them a list of emotions and they'll go, I don't know, this is a stupid question. This question doesn't mean anything. And so I guess like one thing to do there would be to some degree, probably have to almost A/B test this and just try different things, because I think the thing that works better for early focusing, I think, is not particularly trying to use that's capital F focusing, rather than it is not trying to generate really concise labels, but trying to generate accurately a long description of
how you actually feel.
Yeah. So I wonder if something almost like mapping from bodily sensations to, okay, so the app thinks you're feeling one of these three emotions. Let's ask you a series of questions. It's I don't know, is it currently a positive or a negative experience?
Right. So like pick a spot in the body and then have like differential diagnosis of like
exactly. And then at the end, the app can say, I think you're probably feeling this emotion. What do you think about that? Does this feel right? And sort of give people a sort of a series of answers from like, yeah, that feels pretty spot on, to I have literally no idea, to no, that's definitely not right. And either a spot and a that's definitely not right sort of puts you in a position where you can ask more questions about related emotions, because like now you've got a strong signal that they have at least one emotion word that it definitely that they can label, and it definitely isn't, and you can sort of try some related ones.
Yeah. No, that's yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how easy this would be to do. It's one of those things where I feel like I could guide a person through it, but I think I'm probably underestimating the amount of tacit knowledge and like human level understanding that goes into that process.
No, I can see that. This it seems like they're probably like, it's basically a database, right? You have a list of emotions, then you have a list of places in the body that usually are connected to that emotion, and then you have a list of like properties that are somehow like different. So it's like some sensations, or like whether it's heat or not, whether it's a heartbeat or and those kind of things, and then you would kind of like pick the differences between those and try to like through questions, I guess even like automatic generated, get to the bottom
Yeah.
of like, okay, this is the most likely that this person is feeling, which
Mhm.
is, and I definitely that's the other way I was thinking, like either just like provide this, I guess meter where you have a lot of things and you can kind of, but based on the metrics like pleasant, unpleasant, and energy, low energy, see what, try to like get somewhere and then learn whether that's where you got is actually makes sense from the bodily sensation, or the other way around, right? Go through the bodily sensations and then see whether it's like matches the word that's being offered, basically. And yeah, I'm not settled on like which one makes more sense. I guess that would need to be tested, so I'll probably try to do that.
Yeah, I think try that on actual users. It's I couldn't tell you which one makes more sense either. I think maybe implement whichever one is easiest and see which and see what people think of it. But
yeah.
We're sort of coming up to the point where I need to think about going in the next 5-10 minutes. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Wanted to ask?
I think I'm good right now. Definitely appreciate the ideas, and as still trying to figure out what works best. So this is definitely helpful, the feedback, and to hear your thoughts about that. And I think we're pretty aligned on some the ways how it works and could be addressed. So I'll definitely keep you in the loop if there's anything else. Yeah.
Absolutely. Please keep me posted. It sounds super interesting. And yeah, I think I certainly haven't noticed anything in this conversation where we've particularly strongly disagreed about any of how this works. So yeah, best of luck and hope it goes well.
Thanks. And yeah, thanks for the help, and see you sometimes later maybe. Okay.
Great. See you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.